Kashmir is a contested state, split between India and Pakistan. It's been the scene of violent clashes for over 20 years.
Freedom is in our blood. Freedom. If our blood drops, it drops as a freedom.
In 2010, after the discovery of the bodies of 3 civilians killed by the army, young men took to the streets, pelting the Indian forces with stones. When the smoke cleared, more than 4,000 police and soldiers had been injured, and 118 Kashmiris were dead, many of them children. Thousands were detained, and when they emerged, they told chilling tales of brutal torture, revealing a practice that goes back 2 decades.
तो ये पूरा हमारा गोश्त काट कर या मिर्ची और नमक डालकर ये हमारे मुंह में डालते थे.
मेरे नेल्स उठाए ग्लास से मेरे बॉडी के प्राइवेट पार्ट्स पे टॉर्चर किया.
For the last year, we have followed Kashmir's most dogged human rights lawyer as he unearths evidence of the systematic use of torture.
Torture is not a historical issue. It is happening right now in Kashmir Valley.
Kashmir is one of the most beautiful front lines in the world. A vista of mountains and saffron fields, ancient temples and mosques. But this state, roughly the size of Ireland, has brought India and Pakistan to war 3 times. The Muslim majority has long campaigned for independence, with an armed insurgency breaking out in the late 80s. India exposed Pakistan as stoking the violence with bombs and bullets, and almost overnight, Indian Kashmir became one of the most heavily militarized regions in the world. Today, there are 700,000 troops and police in the state, 1 for every 17 Kashmiris. By the beginning of 2011, with the insurgency at its lowest ebb, the Indian security forces were playing cat and mouse with a new generation of protesters, armed only with rocks. India claims these stone pelters are also funded and organized by terror groups in Pakistan. The government says the damage and losses to the economy caused by the riots have cost the state £12 million. The boys know that rioting can cost them their lives. Danish is the brother of 12-year-old Wamik, one of the youngest victims of the recent unrest. He was shot in the head by a police tear gas shell, fired, they say, in self-defense when officers' lives were threatened by stone pelters. After his brother's death, 16-year-old Danish rarely dares to leave his house, doing so only at 5 a.m. when the police and army are still in their barracks.
When I go outside the house, I think so afraid of the police that if he caught me, he will beat me. Then what will I do? My brother, he was 12 years old once. Now I am so alone. Without him, I am so alone. Lot of gap. What is the reason he had killed him? He was 12 years old once. What can he do with a stone? Yeah. Into hospital.
She got asal to nakul or
she done. She asli done.
She asli. You क्या लिखा?
Tear के शाल से she मुझे.
Danish's father, Farouk, has been fighting in court to get to the truth. Recently, 5 eyewitnesses came forward to say that Farouk's son was simply playing a board game with friends when he was shot from behind at a range of just 10 meters.
मगर बुशस पका कोर्टस मज जुमा करे पाने के वारिया कोशिश कि ये करना केस वेडरा ये नीना केस वापस ऐसा सा दिमोय पोंस ऐसा सा दिमोय बाकी चीज बस वना दिमोय रुपीस 5 लाख रुपए ते बे ऐसा दिमोय बचस नौकरी कोर में सुते रिजेक्ट मतलब मसना सब में जरूरत है मगर कोड में लो इंसाफ आत करे अदालत फैसला ये मसन को यम छ कोशिश कर ऐसा कुछ दाबुन कुन तक पट मगर इसमा छ दिवान दबान.
A judicial inquiry recently dismissed the police version of Wamik's death. But caught in a cycle of appeals, his father is seeking the help of Kashmir's top human rights lawyer, Parvez Imroz.
It was a whole thing, you can post was keen, should have board cheese it. Not good as it was be my Garavaya, but Potters is one more decay. That mamma Mrs. Slips a him town is so how much. Tavno Jesus logo yiki, you see a human Nafrani Sazachina logo, you was some low. Like inshallah, Sukar inshallah,
Although Parvez practices law in the world's largest democracy, he sees few successful prosecutions. Since 1989, not a single case of murder, assault, torture or rape brought against the Indian armed forces has been allowed to proceed. The army says it has court-martialed 59 soldiers in that time, but will not name the men or explain the charges.
Personally, I believe that at least some people have to stand and say, no, this is not acceptable, and we will expose, we will campaign against it. I think that's very important, yeah.
That's risky, isn't it?
It is risky, I think everything is risky, but you have to take the risk. Yeah. It is risky, but it is comparing to silence, which will be more risky.
Those risks include arrest. According to government figures, more than 5,200 were detained in the crackdown after the 2010 riots. The alleged ringleaders have been jailed under the draconian Public Security Act, or PSA, that has been used on 20,000 Kashmiris over the last 2 decades. Imprisoned for 2 years without trial, many are re-arrested after release, again under the PSA. Legislation that Amnesty International has condemned as a lawless law. Nazima's brother, a 24-year-old baker, was shot in the head by a tear gas canister and seriously injured during a protest. He was then detained in February 2011 under the PSA because the police allege he had sheltered militants. Fearing her brother will die in custody, Nazima has come to see Parvez. Nazima has already lost her older brother, killed by the army who said he was a militant. Since then, she says the security forces have continually targeted the family.
Asas gase boy nos gar so no chun koi niman mulavazas no es embroid os kanjang manja kara magar we kana sochun kara ki बस आख नौजवान कोर मे सत गो वारिया जुल्म मे सत कोर मिलिट्री वाले वारिया खबर आज आम तौर वनान मोल मोज या सोन बच्चे गोल हुंद शिकार नत पुलिसुक शिकार या अम सत खतर गूल नत अम सत खतर पेशी
जिक्र करुन अल्लाह ताला मंगन ऐसे खुदा टाइम ये टाइम कर इंशाल्लाह पकना ब्रोट
अगर मिस्किन गो क्या करो पत यह सहारा बे कह अगर गो अमिस कह मरो अम सत
Nazima's fears for her brother are well founded. Many of those detained after the 2010 riots have claimed that they were tortured in custody. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has been barred by India from visiting Kashmir since 1993. So Parvez Imroz has set out to interview as many alleged victims as possible to determine if torture is being used systematically by the Indian state. India sees the state of Kashmir as a front line in the war on terror. More than 5,500 soldiers and policemen have died here since the insurgency began, with the government claiming that 37,000 civilians and insurgents have also lost their lives. But as India's very real security concerns have heightened, allegations of human rights violations by its forces in Kashmir have mounted. According to leaked US State Department cables, the Red Cross believes the Indian government condones the use of torture in Kashmir. Parvez Imroz has collected anecdotal evidence over the years that as many as 1 in 6 of Kashmir's 12 million residents have been tortured. But in the face of strident denials by the world's largest democracy, Parvez is attempting the first comprehensive statewide survey.
Torture is a widespread phenomenon here, and we believe that the issue has to be highlighted here. After completing the torture testimonies, prepare a report that should be brought to the international community with the purpose it should stop altogether. Torture has been used very effectively by the law enforcement agencies. Most of the victims, they accept they feel lucky that they're alive, they are not been killed. क्या करोगे torture? आपस में तो करो ताकि तो पर power touch. Torture को नहीं शुक्र. Torture को shen. I can't do it, but we go ahead. He needs to ये केम करने torture छ मतलब ये कलर्स लोगों ने दाब या बाकी चीज ना ये के तमशी नाव पर करो सो torture छ तो कौन क्या करो torture में क्या करो
नंते में जंगन पे खोलो सो
जंगन पर क्या करो
रोलर सो
The roller treatment is a big round heavy roller which is being rolled on their body. In most of the cases, due to kidney failure, they die after some time. These cases, which are very horrendous, they should not go unnoticed. They should be highlighted, they should be agitated, and people who are helpless, they should be given the justice. You can also almost
army. Blago question put ko you go ban.
There are a lot of horrible stories and very difficult, how we can cope up with all the cases, And then you have to prioritize because you have limited resources, you have limited energy.
You go normal parliament jazib due to fear that night and now. But mega so low it search points.
I have a lot of nightmares. I was having nightmares in the early 90s and a lot of nightmares. I remember that And then just 1-2 months before, I have again had a nightmare. After a long time, yeah, that 4 guys coming on a motorcycle in my office. They are waiting for me and they want to hit me like that.
These nightmares stem from real events. In 2008, after 2 fellow Kashmiri lawyers were murdered, the Indian security forces threw a grenade at his home while he and his wife and children were inside. As a result, Amnesty International and the European Parliament both sought assurances about his safety from the Indian government.
People said they have come to shoot Parvez. They had guns and ammunition and all that, and we don't have anything. We have got only a knife to cut the vegetables and nothing else. So sometimes I feel somebody is watching me and somebody is going to kill me just now. I used to hide behind the walls where I can't be shot properly. My daughter understands now what kind of fear, what kind of danger we are going through.
There is a risk, and we always have a worry that if my dad comes late home, or anyone knocks after 7 p.m. In our house, so we feel worry, a sense of worry. So we always have fear in our heart. So that's difficult. It's hard.
Security is needed, but nobody is going to give us any security at all.
Who do you think you need security from?
From the government. Who else? We feel insecure because of the government only. It's a jungle law.
By the summer of 2011, with the mass arrests continuing, new and younger boys take to the streets. The government crackdown tightens, with curfews and a special section of the criminal code used to prevent gatherings of more than 4 people. Today is the UN Day Against Torture, and Parvez had planned a march. It has also been banned.
इन्होंने 144 implement किया है, नाफिज किया है CRP से, उसमें 5 से ज़्यादा आदमी तो आ नहीं सकते. तो उसमें प्रॉब्लम ये है कि अगर हमने किया भी होता तो फिर ये अरेस्ट करेंगे इनको और फिर बाद में केस होगा.
गवर्नमेंट चाहती है कि हम चुप रहें. अब उनके पास लॉ है, एक जो ड्रैकोनियन लॉ है कि आप 4 से ज्यादा लोग जमा नहीं हो सकते. दुनिया की किसी भी जगह इस तरह से जो भी कोई डेमोक्रेसी होती है वहाँ पे इस तरह के बैन नहीं होते. इंडिया क्लेम करता है डेमोक्रेसी और साथ में डेमोक्रेसी को खत्म भी करता है खुद ही.
Who lifted?
One of those working with Parvez is Ashraf Radha. He joined the militancy in the late 1980s, fighting the Indian security forces in a group that was armed by Pakistan. Caught by the Indians in the mid-90s, he says he has renounced violence and now fights by documenting human rights abuses. Ashraf claims he was repeatedly tortured while in custody.
इन सभी जगहों में इतना तशद्दुद हुआ हमारे साथ कि इंसानियत कांप उठती थी. मुझे जब लिटाया गया तो और सबसे पहले मुझे इलेक्ट्रिक शॉक्स इतने ज़ोर से दिए गए कि मैं जब चीखता था तो ऐसा लगता था कि मेरे ये चीखने की जो आवाज़ है ये कहीं 100 फुट के कुएं से आ रही है. तो उसके बाद जो हमारे टॉर्चर के इतने बड़े बड़े बहुत सारे अगर कहें तो किताबों की किताबें.
This time gone. Yes. Today I am feeling that how much my dad has suffered. So these moments make me very, 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 very anxious, very, very angry towards the Indian constitution, the Indian troopers, the Indian rule. my dad one day hanged me a raffle. So I just go to kitchen to show my mom that, look at me, my dad has hanged me a raffle. I just want to become like this. So mom slapped at me and say that I don't want to like you, like picking a gun and choose this way. You can fight with India with your pen.
Abid is studying for a degree in psychology and political science, and for now he is respecting his mother's wishes. He supports the work Parvez and his father do by keeping a journal to document the torture stories of survivors who have suffered over the years. Kalandar Katana was once a farmer who was accused of acting as a guide to militants. He was arrested by the Indian Border Security Force in 1990, shortly after the insurgency began.
ये काम नहीं कर सकती है,
कुछ ये नहीं, ना ये कुछ काम कर सकती है, ना ये कुछ कर सकती है, ना ये कुछ कर सकती है काम। ये जब ऐसे इन्होंने बेल्ट ऐसे तोड़ कर मार कर ऐसे तोड़ कर।
अच्छा, तो ये आपके पैरों की हालत कैसे हो गई?
वहाँ पर जनाब आकर तो वहाँ इंट्रोगेशन में जब हम अंदर बंद थे ना, बारह के अंदर बंद थे, तो उसने आकर वहाँ अंदर से फौज लाई, तो फौज आकर तो पूरे मेरे ऊपर चढ़ गए।
अच्छा, तो
फिर एक ने मारा छुरा ऐसा, तो मेरी टांगी दोनों काट दी।
अच्छा
जी जनाब, तो मैं देख रहा था मेरा खून ऐसा चल रहा था, मेरे पाँव आगे पड़े हुए थे, वो ऐसे ऐसे चल रहे थे मेरे पाँव दोनों।
अच्छा,
तो अभी मेरी ये जख्में ठीक नहीं हो रही हैं। मुझे ये टांगों की जख्म नहीं है, मुझे तो ये पूरा मेरा गोश्त उठाया।
अच्छा,
ये पूरे कमर का गोश्त
दिखा सकते हैं कि वो
ये पूरे गोश्त ये पूरे हमें खिलाया, ये
काट के आपको खिलाया गया?
ये हमारे कतरा कतरा कर हमें ब्लेड से काट कर,
अच्छा,
तो हमें खिला रहे थे। बोलते थे साले आप फिर दोबारा बोलेंगे कश्मीर आजाद करनी है।
अच्छा,
तो ये हमें नमक डालकर और मिर्ची डालकर हमारे गोश्त यहाँ से काट कर हमारे मुंह के बीच में डालते थे।
The State Human Rights Commission in Kashmir investigated Katana's claims and found that not only were they true, but that his case was one of a cluster where the Indian security forces had severed the limbs of suspects or damaged them so badly that amputation was inevitable. But despite a ruling in his favour, Katana's compensation has not yet been paid, and his legal case is still inching its way through the courts, 20 years after soldiers cut off his feet.
Allahu Akbar.
Katana's case comes from the early years of the Troubles, but today Abid and his brothers say they still live in fear.
कश्मीर में देखो एक बार न्यूज़ आती है आज यहाँ पर मारा गया, दूसरे दिन ये न्यूज़ आती है आज वहाँ पर मारा गया, तीसरे दिन ये न्यूज़ गायब ही हो गया। बहुत से लड़के गायब हुए, पता ही नहीं चला है वो कैसे गायब हुए, क्यों गायब हुए, किसी को पता नहीं, उनके माँ बाप को पता नहीं है कि क्यों गायब हुए, क्या वजह क्या थी। इसीलिए हम नहीं जा सकते, हम मजबूर हैं, हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते।
If we hear the word army, will we get tense? Oh, army? No. Outside is not safe. Stay at home. The mothers tell their students, tell their chaps or babies, don't get outside. Outside is army. What? What kind? That is terrorist. We are not terrorists. They are terrorists. They terrorize us. We don't terrorize them.
अब मौत से क्या डरना, ये जो हम रोज मरते हैं इससे तो यही मौत बेहतर है कि वो मौत आए।
In September 2011, the government estimated that there were fewer than 400 militants fighting in Kashmir. But the security forces continue to dominate the landscape.
Every 3 or 4 kilometers you find the paramilitary camps there, and where that people have been arrested and later on disappeared. Meaning a person who has been arrested by the law enforcement agency and they deny his arrest and later on his fate is not known. We fear that the majority of the disappeared persons, they have been killed, and where are their bodies, where they dispose of their bodies is a big question.
The UN wants answers too. In February 2012, its Working Group on Enforced Disappearances reported allegations that since 1989, 8,000 Kashmiris have vanished in the custody of the Indian security forces, 4 times as many as disappeared in Pinochet's Chile. According to villagers, the men in these graves were lured to an army camp with the offer of jobs. A police investigation found that they were then murdered by soldiers in order to claim reward money from the government.
The army claims that they are the foreign militant, right? The body were exhumed and were identified to be the civilians. This has been the pattern of the army, that they are killing the non-combatants Kashmiris and later on they bury them in these graveyards.
Parvez and his team have so far found over 6,000 of these unmarked and mass graves, with 3/4 of Kashmir yet to be surveyed. The UN Special Rapporteur on Disappearances asked to visit India in 2011, but the request has been ignored. So Parvez is continuing to gather testimony, especially from villagers forced by Indian troops to dig the graves.
और ये जो लाशें आप दफनाते थे वहाँ पे मतलब उनकी हालत क्या थी?
किसी को गोली आँख से आई है, किसी ज़बान से आई है, किसी को सिर में आई है, किसी को छाती में आई है, किसी को टांग बाजू में आई है। तो वो सीन हमारे सामने है। आप ये तो बड़ा माशा है, बड़ा कारखाना है। 235 लाशें मैंने दफनाई हैं। सिर से पाँव तक खून खून होता है। हाँ, जिस्म का हिस्सा इधर होता है, किसी का इधर होता है, किसी के पीछे है, किसी के आगे है। इंटरगेशन का निशान अलग होता है।
After 6 years of tenacious inquiry, Parvez has managed to get the State Human Rights Commission to concede that the graves exist. But the Indian security forces still claim the dead are militants and that the missing have fled to Pakistan. The Human Rights Commission has now ordered DNA tests on the human remains in the graves, while in March 2012, the UN reminded India that it is under obligation to investigate those allegations and bring to justice those responsible.
We can also this is pushing us, we can also very kharab. Skala meals be asman pet it is my boys With
money raised by friends of the family, Nazima has been able to make the 12-hour trip to the prison where her brother is being held.
No, I'm still intention because Ben has a clear catch again. Check Karaki. There's one that's absolutely it's also put it. اصل پٲٹھۍ کاربار تہِ کران تٔمِس نہ حظ ہیوٚک نہٕ مےٚ ؤنِتھ کہِ سٲنۍ گرٕچ حالات کیٛاہ چھِ
کۭتِس کالس کوٚروٕ تۄہہِ مُلاقات
اَسہِ حظ کوٚر أڑِس گنٹس کمٕے حظ مُلاقات
تِمو جیل والٮ۪و چھِنا تٔمِس ڈاکٹر
نہ حظ نہ کِہیٖنۍ حظ کانٛہہ قٕصے نہٕ کِہیٖنۍ حظ ٹوٹل حظ تٔمِس حظ اوس یورُک دوا سۭتۍ حظ چھُنہٕ تَس ووتمُت حظ کِہیٖنۍ
تۄہہِ ووٚنوا جیل والٮ۪ن أمِس چھِ یِژھ کنڈِشن أمِس کٔرۍزیو کم سے کم علاج ولاج
تِم حظ چھِنہٕ تَتہِ کانٛہہ کَتھٕے کران تَس گٔے أمِس دوٚپُکھ اَسہِ دوٚپ یہِ مۄکلیو 3 اٹیک آے أمِس خطرناک اٹیک
پرا ہٮ۪مت کٔرِو تھوڑا کینٛہہ البتہ تۄہہِ چھُ ہٮ۪مت کرٕنۍ تٔمِس واتہِ اِنشاءاللہ علاج واتہِ تٔمِس اصل پٲٹھۍ تور پرواے چھُنہٕ کینٛہہ ہٮ۪مت چھِ کرٕنۍ کوٗشِش کرو
بوے اَسہِ چھُنہٕ مگر مدد میلان کینٛہہ اگر حظ أسۍ پرویز صٲبس دِمو أسۍ کاکد اگر حظ سُہ کرِ اَسہِ کینٛہہ حظ بٲیِس یورے یی یا یَلہٕ گژھِ تہٕ أسۍ حظ چھِ تَمہِ کِسٕے بارس منٛز حظ سونٛچان اَسہِ حظ چھُ بوے واریاہ بٮ۪مار حظ تَتہِ
ہاے کوٹ اوس یِمن کیس کوٚرمُت تۄہہِ چھُ کوٚرمُت تَمہِ جایہِ زن سُہ رِجیکٹ سدہمہِ چھُ اَسہِ وۄنۍ بیٛاکھ تٲریٖخ تہٕ تَمہِ وِزِ وٕچھو وۄنۍ کیٛاہ بنہِ
Danish and his family are also pinning their hopes on Parvez. But every time the family win a judgment, the police appeal and delay the hearing.
ژےٚ کیٛاہ چھُ وۄنۍ باسان اِنصاف ہیٚکیٛاہ مِلِتھ اَتہِ
وۄنۍ وٕچھو تَمہِ پتہٕ کیٛاہ کَرو پنٕنۍ کِنۍ چھِ یِم دوٗراوان رَس دوٗراوان رَس وۄنۍ وٕچھو کیٛاہ دٔلیٖلہ بنہِ یپٲرۍ چھِ مٲلی حالات تَتھ کُن چھُ وٕچھُن تہٕ بیٚیہِ چھُ مےٚ گژھان ژےٚ خۄدا یٲری کَرنَے 2 تہٕ 5 دۄہ گٔے مےٚ پٔتمِس ؤرِیَس منٛز کوٹَس منٛز کھسان اَتھ منٛز چھِ رۄپیَس 200-250 گژھان چاے تہِ خرٕچ ییٚمہِ وِزِ مےٚ گواہ کھالُن ٲسۍ پٮ۪وان تَمہِ وِزِ ٲسۍ مےٚ گژھان ژےٚ خۄدا یٲری کَرنَے ییٚمہِ دۄہ مےٚ گواہ اوس تَمہِ دۄہ اوس مےٚ 1,000 رۄپیہِ برابر خرٕچ گژھان ییٚلہِ بہٕ واریاہ پَتھ گوس پَتہٕ پیوٚو مےٚ اوس مےٚ برادٔری بوے اَکھ वोन मे तमिस दोपस मे ता पोस के कड़ मे रॉपिस 50,000 मे तमिस इंटरेस्टस पे सोदस पे खर्च बढ़ान खर्च बढ़े वारिया यपर हसा बचन इन बह वन पलवन अत जड़े कड़ान खाना चनस जड़े कड़ान पे रो दानिश सोबस आय पे हिस्से मुश्किल सही क्या यादाश बहुत जबरदस्त पे
Those kind young, my swing. Huh? That is क्या था हम लड़के नहीं मिल रहा था लड़का
रटान अकिस अकिस पत करान गबई जेलन मज थवान बंद जेल वर वर पत योर कत कर कंस बड़ तो तमिस दिम गूल दरित या दिनस चोब नत निनस रटित
Despite the arrests, the rioting continues. So the government tries to block communications to disrupt the protests.
पहले तो कॉल ये SMS कर रहे थे, उस पर भी बैन लगा दी गई। फिर हम कॉल कर रहे थे, कॉल से एक दूसरे को बुला रहे थे कि इस जगह पेल्टिंग करनी है इस वक्त। फिर आज जो है कॉल भी ट्रेप्स की जाती है बहुत ज़्यादा, उस पर भी लड़कों को अरेस्ट किया जाता है। तो अब हम फेसबुक यूज़ कर रहे हैं, तो मगर जब हम देख रहे हैं कि पिछले कुछ महीनों से कि फेसबुक पे भी बैन लगाई गई, फेसबुक पे भी लड़कों को अरेस्ट किया जाता है।
My friend, he had given the thought for the freedom in the Facebook, and he had caught by the police and thrown into the jail for about three years. I also write in Facebook for freedom. I have the account in my Facebook. It is dangerous, but we have to do this because instead of this there is nothing. Because if we can't do this, then what can I do? I have to leave. I have to do something.
The Indian authorities blame Pakistan for provoking confrontation and claim they have confiscated bundles of money intended to pay teenagers to demonstrate. By late summer 2011, the police say local press coverage is also provocative. So they shut down TV stations, ban the media from visiting certain towns, and attack cameramen and photographers.
Sorry?
The production team is also warned to stop filming and followed by plainclothed police. The security forces are now photographing those throwing stones and rounding them up later, making the boys nervous of anyone with a camera.
No zoom, no zoom. No, all the boys, all the police.
They beat everyone.
Despite the risks, two teenagers recently released from custody were determined to describe what they say happened to them while they were being held.
हमारे से बहुत ज़्यादा टॉर्चर किया गया वहाँ पे, हमारे हाथ पे गन से मारा गया, हमारे चारों ओर डंडे बरसाए गए, मेरे बाजू को ब्लेड से काटा गया, मेरे चेहरे को ब्लेड से काटा गया, हर जिस्म के हर एक एजा से हमारी खून निकल रहा था। बहुत ज़्यादा टॉर्चर किया हमारे साथ।
जो पुलिस का डीएसपी था उसने बोला कि आप ये जो अपने हाथ है ये दोनों टेबल पे रखे। फिर उन्होंने गन उठाया, गन से जोर से मारने लगे, जब तक ना ये भी फट गया, यहाँ से भी खून निकला, तो तब तक उन्होंने नहीं छोड़ा। हमारे आंखों से आंसू भी निकलने लगे, पर हम चलाए नहीं, हम उनसे कुछ नहीं बोले वहाँ पे।
We need drink water. Police officer said give them urine to drink. कह रहे थे कि ये स्टोन बिल्डर है, इसका चेहरा काट दो, इसके हर एक काट दो, इसकी टांगे काट दो ताकि ये दौड़ न सकें, हर एक ऐसा काट दो ताकि यहाँ पे कोई आवाज ना फटे हमारे खिलाफ।
Gathering all these accounts, Parvez adds them to his statewide survey, determined to complete his comprehensive report on torture in Kashmir. The Indian authorities say the security clampdown in Kashmir is paying dividends, with 2011 seeing the insurgency at its lowest ebb for 2 decades. But in February 2012, Human Rights Watch once again highlighted widespread complaints of torture and unlawful killings in Kashmir. Lawyer Parvez Imroz is nearing the completion of the most comprehensive study ever undertaken of torture, past and present, across the state.
There are very severe cases of torture, where the limbs have been chopped, but they're visible. But there are the invisible mental torture, where there are not visible torture marks. The torture victims are suffering from different sorts of the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depressive psychosis. They are not getting the support.
Khabs muz ya bas yil busha khab pat nendr yama ki ajusnes busha ya hajbe halay be me kar khum mesh pe be yad mesh pat aram te yama pur barabar ki bus daban ya revigens torture kar patas go last pe zolo hi bukhar se at last pe umegari garam bukhar.
Yesterday we were in Kupwara documenting the disappearance profiles. When we asked them about torture, they said that, do you want to talk about everyone in the village, because it's almost everyone in the village who has been tortured.
What about the women torture victims? How many we have?
Very few, because the women torture victims, these are cases not of torture only, these are cases of molestation as well. And there is stigma attached to it, and therefore they don't talk about it.
One young girl did decide to speak out. In 2004, when she was 16 years old, she was picked up from school, still wearing her uniform, and accused of aiding militants.
वो था एक इतनी बड़ी सेल थी और उसमें कील लगाते थे उस टाइम। उन्होंने पता नहीं कौन सा बटन दबाया और मेरे बाजू के ऊपर, मेरे टांगों के ऊपर चलाया, तो मुझे इतना दर्द हो रहा था, मेरी आंखें आगे वाली ऊपर जाती थी और मेरी ज़बान पीछे जाती थी, मेरे बाजू बंद थे। एक तो वो दो बंदे थे, तो एक तो मैं अकेली लड़की थी इतनी छोटी, तो मैं कुछ कर नहीं पाई उस टाइम। ऐसे ही कपड़ फाड़े, मेरे यूनिफॉर्म को फाड़े ऐसे, मेरा शलवार भी और मेरा फिराक भी बिल्कुल मुझे ओपन कर दिया उसने। मैं सोच रही थी शायद मेरे इज्जत लूटने लगे तो फिर बाद में मुझे मार डालेंगे, वो तो बाद में वैसा ही हुआ, मेरे कपड़े फाड़ कर और मेरी जिंदगी खराब कर दी उन्होंने। मैं चिल्लाती थी, कोई नहीं सुनता था, खाली मैं ऐसी पड़ी रही घर में।
A Human Rights Watch report found that at the height of the insurgency, rape by the security forces in Kashmir was widespread, with few incidents investigated.
खून की जैसा था वो। मैंने मना किया, मैंने बोला नहीं मैं नहीं पीऊंगी, अभी ला और पानी, मुझे मरना है, आखिरी बार मुझे पानी दे दो। बहुत सारों की जिंदगी तबाह होगी।
With the pressure mounting on Danish's family, Parvez is worried that his parents, like so many others, will abandon their case. The court process is agonizingly slow.
Yes, अगर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने तो क्या तम से मेले बाकी रिश्ते लड़ाई छो तो पनिस बच कर लड़ा के ये बात नहीं करता बात आज से थाम जहनस मज के टाइम छिन का फैक्टर डोर वरी गजन अगर तमन वन है अथस लगन 5 वरी है तिल कुछ प्यार इशे थावन पर जमानस में जहन के छिन टाइम फैक्टर के इसका एज जिसका चलेगा ये everybody has to die. If there is another world, I will not be ashamed seeing these people who have been killed brutally, and I won't be apologetic. At least I will be there with this confidence that I did my best for you here.
Thank you.
After Friday prayers, demonstrations often flare up, especially around the Jamia Masjid, Srinagar's most important mosque. The police have been ordered to stop using live rounds. Instead, they turn to catapults. A group of boys have taken refuge inside the mosque, knowing officers will not enter. Abid and his friends were almost caught up in the latest crackdown.
Nowadays, if you see a new militancy has been born, the stone thrower militancy, you can say it like this. मेरे बहुत सारे दोस्त हैं जो आज तक पथराव करते हैं और हिंदुस्तानी फौज और जम्मू कश्मीर पुलिस के खिलाफ पथराव करते हैं कि बारामूला के खाली में बात कर रहा हूँ 200 लड़के ऐसे होंगे जिनको इन्होंने बनाया होगा, ब्लैक लिस्ट में भरा है। जब भी कोई किस्सा हो जाता है, जब भी कोई पथराव हो जाता है, तो चाहे ये उसमें इन्वॉल्व हो नहीं हो, फिर भी ये उनको पकड़ कर ले जाते हैं, उनको इनके साथ हर वक्त टॉर्चर किया जाता है।
Parvez is assembling his draft findings. He believes his evidence will dwarf previous assessments of the scale of state-sponsored torture. After conducting interviews across the entire state, he has found that in some areas 2 out of every 3 men claim to have been tortured by their own government.
The way torture has been done in a very systematic and institutional way. You have the testimonies from the torture survivors that how organized way they have been done. The torture have been done throughout J&K. So the people behind that, they have to be exposed. Because future, I think, will be only safe once the perpetrators are taken to justice.
But his family are anxious about the consequences for them.
तो आपको नहीं लगता है कुछ फैमिली के लिए ये कोई डेंजर की बात तो नहीं है कि हमारे लिए कोई प्रॉब्लम खड़ी हो जाए?
क्योंकि अब ये होगी ना, रिलीज होगी ना, प्रूव भी हो गया कि हाँ है ये वही लोग, वो डेंजर बढ़ सकता है ना।
ये रिस्क तो लेना पड़ता है ना, ये अब रिस्क के बगैर तो फिर नहीं होगा ना कुछ।
रिस्क की तो है ही, चलो फिर आगे बात क्या बनो, अल्लाह की मर्जी।
For Nazima, there is good news at last. A judge has ruled her brother must be released immediately, as the police have failed to present any evidence that he shielded militants.
An kalas is dod kara manz manz besh par dag yapın katsan vasan te dag zabardast. Az kya? Stretch. Stretch करे फूल तो
garden gaya fara. Sos yapoi charab naini amut. Sos yapoi tom tem satam dag.
Lazım sigaret bitti
Ite tom cigarette bitti yapoi charab naini amut ki yapoi. Padar me varmul vush. Kya gotem sat.
With part of his skull missing, Feroz still needs treatment for the head injuries he suffered. But his fingernails are now regrowing.
Zod kamzor goes bel mein nam kade. Amaz ni pat nam donway total kade. Patas rok tat mus marcang masala ni trekas keman mas. Etchi ethi buyotan aste yut asik ne miyotan te kormut ki varihan naujawan korok et patan zulum. Ki kafyan yamanish media te huk voitet at zulmas khilaf paich awaz tolin. Which is guaranteed one ki at zulmas khilaf tulan tamam naujawan action nin at khilaf. Kyaz ki asat chiwan zulumas karna. Bas it's honest man.
In March 2012, the UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Executions visited India for the first time, meeting Parvez Imroz. Afterwards, Christoph Haynes warned that India faced considerable challenges and called for the UN expert on torture to be allowed in. Imroz fears that if nothing changes, there will be more violence to come.
सरकार को ये पता है कि कश्मीर जो है ये एक उभरता हुआ लावा है, ये कभी भी फट सकता है. कश्मीरी अवाम जो है ये इस लावे का ईंधन है, ये कभी भी फट सकता है और किसी भी वक्त ये तूफान ला सकता है. It's coming to generation because it's a kind of pressure which is in the mind. When my father is killed in front of me, what I will do? It's not like today I will become a suicide bomber. No, I lose my mind. I lost everything, and what I will do? I will just put the bomb on my body. I will not think whether I will be killed or nothing like that.
So it's very hard to us to enjoy the value of life. Our value of life remains zero. If the human being is one and the same, you have two eyes, I have two eyes. You have one nose, I have one nose. You have two ears, I have two ears. Why is this discrimination of peace? You have peace, why don't I have peace?
Yeah, I can't say that what will happen in my future because I didn't have belief in my heart that tomorrow am I alive?
Explore the torture trail further with exclusive videos, case studies and a Q&A with the director of the programme at channel4.com/Kashmir.